Hi, I'm Danny Glover, and you're watching Joburg Today.
Most entrepreneurs struggle with the reality that there is just not enough hours in the day to get everything done. There are always new ideas to be looked into, exciting projects on the horizon, existing projects to focus on, networking to do, the list goes on. It's hard for some entrepreneurs to stay focused on the daily running of the business. That's because entrepreneurs are generally creative, inspired people, and the challenge may be to stay grounded, humble, and focused. So the question is, how important is personal development for entrepreneurs? Dr. John Demartini is in the studio with me to discuss. And to answer that question, John, how important is it?
I just addressed that issue last night, so it's quite interesting. It come up again today. It all depends on what we define personal development to do. We could say that it's about mastering your life. I like to think of it that way.
Sure.
Personal development is really about being authentic and doing the actions that allow you to fulfill what's truly most meaningful to you in as many areas of your life as you can. So I'll use it. You know, almost many of my interviews, we talk about values. So a person has a set of values, a set of priorities. And whenever they're living by the highest values, they have the most authenticity, the most inspiration, they have the most leadership qualities that emerge, they tend to expand their space and time horizons, they're more reliable, they're more achieving, they're more self-worth oriented, they grow. So living by priority has always been one of the keys in achievement. If you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, your day fills up with low priority distractions that don't. So an entrepreneur must know themselves and know their own values enough to be able to keep on priority and to make sure that they say no to things that are minors and say yes to things that are majors. When I just worked with a group the other day, just 2-3 days ago, and we made them go through and make a list of everything that they're doing a day. These are entrepreneurs that have $1 to $10 million companies, okay? They're small companies. And I said, make a list of everything you do. So they write them down and wrote down everything they do in a day, typical day. Then next to that, I wrote a column and I said, okay, how much does that produce per hour? How much does that action actually produce per hour? Let's get accountable, let's get real, let's extrapolate, let's get as real as we can. How much does it really produce per hour? And they're like looking at each other going, ooh boy. And they realized that just by doing that and going down every one of those things they typically do in a day, they found out that a good 30% of what they were doing wasn't making anything. And then I said next to it, write down, what's the meaning of it? On a 1 to 10 scale, how much meaning it is? Because sometimes you'll do something that's extremely meaningful, but it doesn't make anything. But you need to go and find out what that is. And then how much would it cost to replace somebody to do it if you were to delegate it? Equally as standard and every cost involved, not just the salary, but every cost. And then how much time is spent on it? And I went through those 5, and everybody was sitting there, and they looked at each other. And then I asked them, how many of you have been majoring in minors and minoring in majors and knowing that you're actually, because you haven't taken command of your priorities and you haven't been able to say no to other people and you haven't really looked at what was really important to the people that you're selling to, how many of you can see that you've been minoring in majors and majoring in minors? Every hand went up. And these are successful people that have already succeeded for at least 5 years or more. So these are people that are relatively, you know, on their way to building a business, and they were still not doing it, let alone the startup.
So that must have been mind-blowing for
they were all just sat there and go, oh boy. And they were joking with each other and teaching each other because a lot of them knew each other in the group. And they're going like, you know, you're sitting off and you're going off and doing this and you're doing that. And you're going through and doing an objective, true evaluation of what is working and not working is very hard to face. It's humbling. And you need that. You need somebody. That's where accountability comes in, to be accountable to do the things that really are valuable. And personal development is about handling the accountability of doing the things that really work and not sitting there and lying to yourself about what you're doing. Because a lot of people, you know, I ask people how many want to be financially independent, and they all put their hands up. And I said, how many of you are? And they all put their hands down. A lot of them. And I go, well, why? You have a fantasy about being financially independent, but you don't have the values that will lead you there, and you're not doing the actions that will lead you there. So are you really seriously committed to doing it?
Sure.
When you're really committed to something, you'll metric it, you'll get objective feedback about it, you'll reprioritize it, and you'll refine what you're doing. And there you don't see failure, you see feedback and refinement, and do incremental changes consistently to lead to an outcome as an entrepreneur. That's the key that makes it work, is prioritization. And Gary Keller wrote a book, The One Thing, and talked about what is that one thing that you're going to stand out for? What is the one thing that your brand is going to represent? What is the one thing that is the most important thing that you can do in a day? And I found that that's extremely valuable. I was asked by Mary Kay from Mary Kay Cosmetics 32 years ago, what are the 7 highest priority actions you can do each day that can help you fulfill your dream? I narrowed that down, I stuck with those, and I got to fulfill my dream by doing it. So prioritization is a very crucial component. And not just prioritization for yourself, but prioritization when you're working with a customer, you need to prioritize what you're saying, doing, and selling to the customer. When you're working with employees, you need to prioritize how you're articulating what their job responsibilities are to make sure it's allocated to match their values so they're engaged. And when you're doing it yourself, you need to prioritize doing the highest priority things that give the greatest results, or you can't expect to have great results. It's unrealistic to expect to do lower priority things and expect high performance.
Sure, that's very important, John. But I want to go into the characteristics of an entrepreneur when it comes to personal development. I interact with many entrepreneurs here in Joburg, and a lot of them say they had to conquer certain qualities about themselves to actually be in a position to really serve the world. What would you say, what do you think they meant by that? What do you mean by that?
The fear of rejection.
Important to conquer?
The fear of rejection. There's the fear of not knowing enough. There's 7 basic fears. The fear of not knowing enough. I don't know enough, so I'm afraid to make a decision, and I need to find somebody that knows it, but I'm going to fear rejection because I'm going to look stupid if I ask for the advice. So the fear of not knowing enough, fear of failure, fear that it won't work.
Sure.
Because you can anticipate it. And fear is never anything but what you're imagining is about to occur. The fear of not making money or losing money doing it. The fear of losing loved ones or the respect of loved ones if you do it.
Yeah.
The fear of social rejection if you do it or if you don't do it. You can get caught, both of them. The fear of not having the vitality, the energy, that just because you're just doing so much, and the fear that you won't have the sustainability to do it, or the fear of breaking some morals and ethics of some authority that you've subordinated to, or some cultural norm in order to pull off something that's going to change the paradigm. And so those fears are the ones that most entrepreneurs have to face. And fear is an assumption that there's more drawbacks and benefits to some behavior. And the reality is when you actually go through it and do the behavior, you find out that that wasn't even real. It was just false evidence appearing real.
Sure.
But going through that and finding out if you were to do that, what's the benefits? And if you don't do it, what's the drawbacks? And change the ratio of perceptions, get you back into action.
I think the feedback is very valuable, John. There are a lot of mentorship programs out there in the market for developing entrepreneurs, but I think when you have an idea, you get into business, maybe you get lucky, you don't realize that you also need to maybe look at your own traits and develop yourself as such. Do you think that it is really worthwhile looking into these mentorship programs available for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, but you want to make sure that you know your own values first to know, because when in the 80s, I went into 1,000 different health clinics and consulted for the 1,000 clinics within a decade. I did a lot of them. And I watched doctors particularly go and find a mentor that didn't match their personality and their value system, and they were trying to be somebody they're not, and it wouldn't work. So you want to make sure that the person that you're mentoring under has got a value structure similar to yours to mentor under, or you're going to end up having internal conflict between doing something that's not really valuable, and you're going to find yourself having resistance. So, but if you find somebody that does match that, a mentor can save you an enormous amount of time. I had doctors coming in my office that wanted to work in my office, and I had a large practice, and the average clinic didn't do as well as ours. And so by having them come in and spend 6 months in mentoring under there, that saved the trajectory of their career path over the next 40 years, millions of dollars of learning curves. So without a doubt, a mentor can be a value and a coach can be valuable. And reading the biographies of people who pulled off these achievements and finding it out is what adds to foresight instead of having to learn from hindsight. Otherwise, you're learning through trial and error, reinventing a wheel every time you start something. Now, there's sometimes you need to take your intuition and just follow it.
Sure.
But you're wise to have mentorship along the way. I without a doubt, and also the people you hang out with. If you hang out with millionaires, you're probably going to be a millionaire. You hang out with a billionaire, you're probably going to be a billionaire, because they're going to think differently.
Yeah.
And if you hang out with people that are struggling, you're probably going to end up with that same mode, because that's their level of skills and understanding and congruency. So you want to surround yourself with that. But personal development, the people I find that need it the most do it the least.
Like Steve Jobs.
Well, the people that do it the most need it the least, and the people that need it the least do it the most.
Like Steve Jobs, very
Exactly.
successful entrepreneur, but he also came across, so he was touted by some people as being stubborn, etc., not willing to look at ideas, and he experienced some serious setbacks, yet he was very successful. What do you make of him as an entrepreneur?
Well,
you
I
look
think
at him and his traits and in the context of personal development?
Well, I think that I don't know of anybody. I mean, Collins addressed this in one of his books on leadership, that Bill Gates and Paul Allen would have fisticuffs sometimes. They'd have fights about it because they're different ways of doing things. I don't think you're going to have peace without some war. I don't think you're going to have cooperation without competition. I think you're going to have both along the journey. And sometimes you're going to get your feathers ruffled up. I can easily admit that I've had many, many arguments along the journey as being an entrepreneur with people that work with me and even mentors and things like that. But when you consider that small portion of that compared to the overall effect, you gotta be willing to go through those rough moments in order to get the outcome. But mentorship will save an enormous amount of time. And Steve sometimes was stubborn on certain things, and that would hold him back. But also his creativity was also his strength. So
Sure.
everything has two sides, and you need to know where to use it and how to use it. But I think that mentorship, when I was involved in the mentorship, that mastermind group in Houston, Texas, my business definitely grew. When I went to this special group, they had 20 doctors that all had multi-million-dollar practices, and I hung out with them for a 2-year period. That catalyzed growth in my business because they learned how to efficiently manage business.
Sure.
So without a doubt, those were stepping stones in my growth. And I think personal development is an absolutely essential thing. If you're not growing on the inside, don't expect your business to grow on the outside.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much.